You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the interactive interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Interactive Interview on the interactiveinterview.com. As always, courtesy of ProWrestling.com. Our special guest today, we're honored to present Magnum TA. Magnum, how you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Oh, we're doing very good, very good. The fans have been asking for this for a long time, and the question that they always seem to be asking us is, what have you been up to lately since you left the wrestling profession?
Well, I have been involved in a completely different industry and line of work. I've been involved in the cellular communication construction industry since 1995, and it's been demanding, rewarding, challenging, all the things that, all the ingredients everybody needs to give them the motivation to get up and get out of bed in the morning and try to be successful. And it's been a very interesting twist because I never really imagined myself being in a full-blown construction-type business at this stage of my life.
Going back to a more wrestling-oriented interview, were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Absolutely. My earliest memories of TV, probably 6, 7 years old, were watching the old Mid-Atlantic wrestling with my dad, and every week, and seeing all the things going on back then, and growing up watching Johnny Weaver and Rip Hogg, Sweet Hansen, even in my teens watching Johnny Valentine and Walter McDaniels have some very fierce battles. So yeah, I was a fan from the word go.
Who were some of you? Oh, you just mentioned some of your favorites. A question coming in from the forums from a guy named Rick Clark. He'd like to know if you played any sports in college.
I wrestled from the time I was 13 years old right up until the time I left college. And I was a state champion in Virginia back in 1977 and took third in the Nationals that same year. And left college after my freshman year in pursuit of my professional wrestling goals.
Who actually trained you for pro wrestling?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of in-the-ring training outside of what I did once I started. Buzz Sawyer was the one that actually got the door open for me, so to speak, and we worked out the ring, I think, 2 times before I had my wrestling debut up in Portland, Oregon, working for Don Owens, and it was pretty intense and pretty unique situation, but anyway, it wasn't a formal training like you hear guys in modern times going to schools and all the things that people do trying to break into the wrestling business.
On and off the air, you and Dusty Rhodes seem to have a pretty close relationship. What is your relationship like with Dusty now?
For the fact that we're completely in 2 separate entities of the world as far as our occupations. I mean, he still dabbles in that end of the world, and I don't. We probably talk every 3 to 6 months. We stay in contact on the telephone, and we don't see each other as much as either one of us would ultimately like. But I mean, that is a bond and a friendship that was established back in the early '80s, and something that's still very special to me today.
Do you remember the first time you met Dusty?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I had come to Florida Championship Wrestling under Mike Graham and Eddie Graham, and they had brought me in there, giving me an opportunity to continue my education in the business, so to speak. And Dusty wasn't there when I very first came in, but he came in later, and we started traveling together and just struck up a very unique friendship and a bond that lasted throughout the years.
Did you hear that in a recent edition, I guess it was about a year ago, of NWA Total Nonstop Action, the pay-per-views, weekly pay-per-views, he actually mentioned you in a promo when he was starting a feud with Nikita Koloff. Did you hear about?
Really? Well, that'd be very appropriate, in as much as that was Nikita's kind of his transition to a fan favorite from a villain back when I had my accident. He and I, of course, had the Best of 7 series for the U.S. heavyweight title back in those days, and it was certainly a very heated feud. And when I had that untimely accident, they turned him over a tag partner for Dusty. So I can see where that might have been brought back up in some storyline or means of conversation.
As you just touched on it, what is some of your memories of that best of 7 series against Nikita Koloff?
Well, I've told this in the shoot interviews I've done and whatnot. Nikita and I were head-to-head back when he was very young in the business. He was probably had been in the business maybe a year and a half or less at the time, and Nikita was kind of a challenge for me because it was my first opportunity to be the veteran in the ring in a main event type situation, and he was very charismatic and a lot of incredible physical talents, but didn't have the experience to be what we call a ring general. So it was pretty much up to me to make sure the match, stayed on the tempo and the thing went where it needed to go. And we had quite a few matches that went in excess of 30 minutes, and we were able to excite fans to a pretty heated frenzy. So to me, that whole series of matches, looking back on it today, was kind of like my graduate school study, where I really felt like for the first time I was really in a position to do anything I wanted to do in the business, because I felt like if I could have great matches with someone that young and inexperienced, that I was in a position to go to the very top and do whatever I wanted to do.
Now, listener GSU Panther wants to know what's the information on when you was in the height of your feud with Ric Flair over the World Heavyweight title. You were apparently photographed in a bar having a beer with him. Were you and are you still close to Ric Flair?
Yeah, Rick and I have always had a very mutual respect for each other, as well as most professional athletes, not unlike people that line up in front of the gridiron in each other in a professional football game. You can, in the heat of battle, have a lot of emotions and a lot of strong self-feelings when you're in the middle of a feud. But I always had a respect for Rick. I had watched Rick in the 70s before I ever got in the business in 1980, and it always had a lot of admiration for him. And certainly we were very heated competitors, and I felt like were it not for the fact that I had a untimely exit from the business at only 27 years old due to that accident I was in, I would have been able to unseat him from his position of dominance with the world's heavyweight title. And and so yes, we went through some pretty heated times, but not nearly the heated times I had with some of my other adversaries.
Another adversary would be Butch Reed, and you wrestled him in Mid-South for the North American Championship several times. Any memories of wrestling Butch Reed?
Oh yeah, Butch was just an absolute tremendous competitor, and had the same kind of intensity that I brought to what I did in the ring. And I really that was my first big one-on-one singles title type challenge that I remember, with a lot of pride. The heated battles that he and I had that went very long periods of time, very physical, yet something that taught me a lot about the business. And I still have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration and good memories of Butch Reed today.
And speaking of the North American title in Mid-South, Andrew MacDonald wants to know that you and Nikolai Volkov battled for that title several times. Do you have any good memories of that feud?
Oh yeah, and Nikolai was someone who was had been a big star for many years prior to making my way into the main events, and just an incredible athlete. My gosh, one of the strongest men I've probably ever come in the square circle with. And though he wasn't maybe the charismatic of a Tully Blanchard or a Ric Flair or other people that I can think of, he was tough as nails, and for the most part, even though he was not a fan favorite back in those days, he was just a straight up tough guy. And you had to have your hats off to him, as a guy 300 pounds in shape like he was, and to have the kind of intestinal fortitude to compete on the level that he did. He was, somebody that I still remember, as quite a competitor.
Two past guests, Jake Roberts and Shane Douglas, shared very different views on this next guy. What are your feelings and impressions of Bill Watts?
Bill Watts. Wow. Bill Watts, very, very astute businessman, someone who was a wrestler, who went on to become a very successful promoter, very driven, very very opinionated, and a lot of times we laugh and joke, talk about like the class of '84. I've heard guys say back when the Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express and myself and Terry Taylor and all the guys that were there when that territory really popped, and had its some of its biggest houses of all time. It was like working in a pressure cooker, because Bill always he felt himself this ultimate teacher, that he really wanted to bring young talent up and make stars out of them. But he was one of those personalities that you either found out how to exist with him and coexist and be successful, or you absolutely couldn't stand him. And he had kind of type A type personality, and it was something at that stage of my career and my professional endeavors it was quite a learning experience, and I'm grateful for it. But as I developed and became a main eventer and a seasoned veteran, you didn't have the patience for his attitudes and for his boisterous comments and his demeaning things that he would do and whatnot, and you wouldn't tolerate it and wouldn't have to. So as a young guy coming up, it was kind of a part of the red badge of honor, or courage, I guess, so to speak, in working your way up through the road. But people like people who had made it and who had really gone out in the world and been successful would not have put up with the attitudes and the whole mindset that Bill was so famous for. And that's why he was successful in that little world that he had created there in Mid-South. He found young guys that had not made it big, and created stars out of them, and he knew the psychology of the business as well as perhaps anyone. He grew up studying under Eddie Graham, who was just an absolute genius, as did Dusty Rhodes came up studying under Eddie Graham. So there's a lot of good, solid backgrounds there, but as far as the style, it will only work with young guys. Veterans would never put up with it.
Absolutely. How would you compare Bill Watts to Vern Gagne?
Well, I don't know Vern personally the way, I worked for Bill for a year and a half, so I've got a lot of heads-up, hands-on, time and experience with Bill. Vern, I've heard stories about, talked for hours with people like Ric Flair and Ole Anderson and, folks who spent a lot of time with him. I think in terms of success, I think Vern was a much more acclaimed athlete and legitimate athlete in the things that he had accomplished as an amateur in college and football and things that he did. He was a true sports hero, whereas Bill was such a student of the game. He made his claim to fame totally in the wrestling industry, and they don't have the same background.
Right.
So, and so I can't compare. It wouldn't be comparing apples to apples, because I worked for Vern a couple times. I wrestled a big show at Comiskey Park, the last big show, outdoor show they had there before they tore that stadium down. Ric Flair and I wrestled out there in a big deal. As a matter of fact, last time I saw Kerry Von Erich live, and that whole group of people back in 1985. So I can't give you a real fair adaptation of comparing the two, because I don't have as much experience with Vern.
What are your memories of the late, great Wahoo McDaniel?
The Chief was just a complete classic. They really broke the mold when they made him. The things that really endeared myself to, feeling passionate about wrestling as a teenager was watching just the brutal battles that he had with Johnny Valentine that I mentioned earlier. And, I just admired the physicality that those two men exhibited in their contests in the ring. And later, having the opportunity, coming when I came to Mid-Atlantic, working for the Crockett's and being involved in, a series of matches with Wahoo McDaniels and going on to beat him for the U.S. heavyweight title in Charlotte, North Carolina in a steel cage match is something that will always stand out to me as a real highlight in my career because it was someone I admired greatly. I think he's probably the greatest Indian athlete of all time, a real man's man, outdoorsman, someone who had a tremendous passion for life and for the wrestling industry and great endeavors in amateur and professional football, and kind of had him hand me the torch, of the U.S. title, and to have been involved in what I consider to be probably his last great single one-on-one match is something that will always be very special to me.
Many times in the NWA, you seem to be carrying double duty, feuding with the Russians and the Four Horsemen. The Russians were known for more of a more brawling style, and the Horsemen were more technical. Which style did you enjoy working more?
Well, honestly, at one time, especially wrestling with Rick, there was a lot of, it was more technical wrestling type deals. Rick did have the background and did know the moves, and it was very much a skilled deal with him, and as it was with Tully Blanchard and a host of other people. But really, towards the end of my run there in '86, almost everything I'd been involved in were turning more into just battles.
Right.
And the drop kicks and wrist locks and arm drags and all those things were almost the exception rather than the rule because things were so heated that there was just such an animosity of things going on, and we were so heated trying to claw our way to the top, for that world title that there was a lot of very intense brawls that took place. And I enjoyed the technical wrestling type match. I won't say that I don't there, but the fans just go nuts over the brawls.
Right.
I mean, they go absolutely crazy over them. And so, us being, human beings, we try to give people what they want. And, that's what they want, that's what they got. And I didn't see it ever changing. And I was, and I'm watching what's taking place today.
Right.
With the high flying and the acrobatics and the things that go on. I mean, those are really neat little things, and they're exciting to watch in different parts of the shows. But the things that people still talk about today are, the Hell in the Cell and the high-impact cage matches and the brutality of things like I went through in the I Quit match. And that's what people remember out of all the little cutesy, flips off the top and all that stuff. That's great, but, it's more acrobatics, and it takes skill, and it's, and it's something certainly to be admiring of. But, people remember the feuds, the animosity, between two competitors, and, sitting there on the edge of their seat, feeling like they're watching two people just beat the crap out of each other,
Good point. Do you watch the business regularly anymore, or?
Well, I don't follow it the way, I did years ago. I did follow it pretty heavily for several years, but I mean, being a business owner and having other responsibilities, I mean, I'll still watch it, flicking through the channels, and there's still people there that I, enjoy seeing, if The Undertaker's out there, or Steve Austin, or Eddie Guerrero, or, the Wolverine.
Chris Benoit?
Yeah, Chris Benoit. Guys that I know come kind of from the old school, that have paid their dues, that can take it on any level. That I have a lot of time and respect for, and I'll still watch that and get a chuckle out of it. I don't like watching, some of the stupid stuff and the things that they do just for entertainment, because I don't think it's appropriate family entertainment.
Right.
It's just the stuff we were watching 11 o'clock at night. It was only adults to do one thing, but things that I appreciate as an adult, I don't want my kid watching.
Right. Right.
And that's the part of it that, I think we used to leave a whole lot more to the imagination than what they do today.
Right. Well, that's true with a lot of things in society, which is...
Yeah, it's not just, and exactly, and I don't blame it on wrestling, because wrestling has always been a direct reflection on what the public, where they're at,
right.
as far as their views, their morality, their likes, their dislikes. All wrestling has ever done is given people a mirror image of whatever it is they want. And so it's where we're at. We're past Generation X. We're in Generation Y now.
Right.
Everything's evolving and changing and moving on. But, I'm glad to see, guys, come back and still show that, guys with talent and who understand the psychology of the business, can still go out there and entertain the people. And it doesn't have to be somebody, catapulting out of the ceiling,
right.
with their hair on fire, just to make them, just to excite them.
Well, exactly. Let me ask you this question, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what do you think of guys I don't know how to put this politely, but of Ric Flair's age in the ring?
Well, the thing is, and I can't imagine, and I'm not ever going to say, oh, I would never do that. I mean, Rick's 10 years older than me.
Right.
And my hat's off to him for the simple fact that he's physically capable of doing what he does.
Mm-hmm.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for Shawn Michaels.
Right.
But, he's on the tail end of his deal,
Right.
as far as where, as professional athletes or entertainers, whatever you want to call it, would envision ourselves to be. I don't blame them, because there's money to be made, and they're still a step above everyone else, and they can still do it. But where do you find that graceful exit?
Right.
To having had a great career, be able to look back on it fondly. Do you want to be out there looking less than your best, and
right.
not remembered in your prime and in your peak?
Right.
And we're such a visual world today that there's just no way that a 50-year-old man is going to be able, that's gone through all the stuff that we put our bodies through, is going to be able to look like a 28-year-old.
Exactly.
That's in the best shape of his life. Can you outwork him? Can you out-wrestle him? Yeah, maybe you can. But it's not, for me, it's not the way that I want to be remembered. But let me just say this about that: if I'd never had the accident,
right,
and if I was out there making millions and millions of dollars, and
right.
still being the adrenaline junkie for the crowd that I was, and just thriving on the pop of the crowd and performing, could I turn it down? I don't know. So I'm not gonna, sit here on my high horse and call the kettle black, because I don't know what I would do in the exact same circumstance.
Exactly. You mentioned your crash several times, and this will have to be the last question for today. So, first of all, will you come back to join us next week? Because we would love to have you on for more.
I'd be absolutely glad to.
The final question is about your crash. What can you tell us about the accident that took place that ended your career?
I haven't said, before. It was a freak thing. I was 5 minutes from my home. Car hydroplaned on a really heavily rain-soaked road, and lost control of it, and I was running about 50 miles an hour, and just driving down a road I've driven down 1,000 times before, and fate was not in my corner. But the fact that I survived it, much less overcame the odds and was able to walk out of the hospital and get back to be able to take care of myself and be ambulatory again, is nothing short of a miracle. And I'm very thankful for that every day. we'll never take that for granted ever again. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, once again, we always say to the guests we're honored to have them on, and I really want to say that for many years I've been a fan of yours, and I do consider it an honor to have you on the program.
Well, guys, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. So nice to be remembered. Wrestling fans are the most loyal fans in the world, and I'm just honored to have been a part of the business and something that's made such a mark on so many people.